And there's something about redeemed things, right? And me and Ash we have a love. It's for the ages. It's just so darn special. I mean, I don't know what to say, but we didn't know how to love each other. I thought it was about marriage was about sex and supper, and that was the whole plan. That was working, and once it stopped working, I thought, oh my God, we're having problems. But there's a lot more to it than that. A generous God built something in the garden for a husband and wife. You know, it's one of the only things we're allowed to bring out of the garden is marriage. What a gift. For God to give us somebody to love us that's our compatible opposite usually, and that he's going to use it to conform us to the image. God sent us the sandpaper and the grit we needed.
Today on the Generosity Now podcast, we have John and Ash Marsh joining us. They are a dear, active Christian family that is doing some amazing things. And I just can't wait. We can't wait for you to hear some of the story of redemption that God has done in and through them and through the work that we're doing. Ash, John, welcome to the Generosity Now podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
We're so glad to have you. I've been anxiously waiting for you to join the podcast for, actually before we actually started the podcast over, going back years, I've been wanting to have this conversation. So, Ash, John, tell us a little bit about your story. Tell us, where'd you grow up? What was family life growing up? We'd also love to hear how you came to know the Lord. And you guys have shared that story before in the past, and it is a radical story of conversion. We just love it.
How about I let you start that, Mr. Marsh?
All right. Well, I grew up in Albany, Georgia. My mom and dad tried for 13 years or so to have a child, adopted me as an orphan, and 18 months later had my little brother. So my mom said it best. She said, all I ever wanted to be was a mama, so I went to spoiling you when I got you. I've been looking at an empty baby carriage for 10 years, and I was ready for a baby. And so she loved me, obeyed my parents, and AB honor roll all the way up until the time when I first remember sinning against God. Like in everything I knew that I wasn't supposed to have sex. And at 13 years old, I had sex with my little girlfriend that was 12 and started rebelling against God and my parents. And, there's something about rebellion. Rules and regulations without a relationship always equal rebellion. And so I had these rules and regulations. I thought the church was about hot dogs and hot girls, but I didn't know anything about this old guy, Jesus, walking in sandals. And so, I ended up being pressed through that situation to start rebelling. 17 years old, for the first time in my life, I tried drugs, and I've got an addictive personality. And I think God builds us that way because we're built to be addicted to him, can't get enough. Hear this story about addiction, and they said, the kind of AA in the world of addiction recovery says addiction is giving up everything for one thing. But they say recovery is giving up one thing for everything. But what's so interesting to us as believers, when we give up everything for one thing, we get everything. And so this dynamic of, I believe I was longing for acceptance, and money and girls showed me acceptance that I could actually understand. 17 years old, tried drugs, and when Ash and I met, I was a drug addict, and she didn't know. She didn't know, and I kind of won her through false advertising, which is what you have to do if you're not a man of character. And we got married, and 3 years in, we're 3 days from divorce, $1.5 million in debt, $99,000 overdrawn, and I was hooked on meth. And I'd led my family in a way that didn't honor God. And I planted corn and didn't get apples. That's what God sings. You reap what you sow. So if you're planting corn today, don't think apples are coming in the next harvest. So I didn't honor God or honor my wife and destroyed my family, and went in the attic of my house because, when we get to the point where it hurts too bad and costs too much, we're pressed into a corner. And that's kind of what coming to the end of ourself is. So I kept fantasizing and hearing, kill yourself, take your life. And I think this is the lie of the enemy, okay? Because is it right that the life I lived was not worth living? Yes. Did I really need to die? Yes. But it's perverted in the world sense. Instead of laying down your life and dying to yourself, the enemy tries to convince us to kill ourselves. So attic of my house, about to hang myself, had the rope, old plywood floor, and got down on that plywood floor and cried out to a God I never met before. And like lightning struck my body, his love got past the fence. And for the first time in my life, I felt clean and loved and cared for. And I was addicted for the moment it happened. And I told him, if this is what serving you's like, I'll follow you all the days of my life, no matter what. But please bring Ash home. And so I just asked God to make me the kind of man that she could see God working in. And I got born again, came down the stairs and said, baby, I got saved. She said, you're a liar. You've always been a liar. This ain't the truth. And so it took a while for me to just let my feet line up with my mouth and God begin to work in our marriage. 7 years of counseling, 2 times a week. And when people see, Ash and I have had the privilege of front row seats to 208 broken marriages reconciled today. And God's used the comfort of the love and care people gave us to give them to others. And so there's hope for broken things, especially broken relationships. And so we reconciled, and now we have the privilege of sharing that love with others. And everything I've ever dreamed of, I've found in Ash as I'm serving God.
He's something else, isn't he?
Absolutely.
I adore him. I'm from here. Opelika is my hometown. I grew up in a little village called Pepperell, and it's a mill village, and my entire family worked there. My mom, my dad. So sorry, I don't know how to turn that off. My mom, my dad, and my cousins, my uncles, you name it, they all worked here. And so I grew up in a little place that mostly was, I would say, poor. Just very, I don't know, just a very not depressed environment, but not a embellished environment, I guess you could say. My dad was a hard worker, but he was also an alcoholic. So I grew up in a home that actually sometimes wasn't at the kindest nature. But I also grew up in a home of love. And so I knew I was very well loved my whole life, but I never felt accepted. And I was always striving for my dad's attention or acceptance or to be worthy to him or to anyone actually that paid me attention. So lo and behold, the first person that really paid attention to me is that fella up there on this podcast. So John saw me, and he says that when he saw me, he saw royalty. He saw a queen that was, in transformation there, I guess. But anyhow, he was the first person to really pay attention to me. And so the first time I rebelled against my parents was with John. It's the first time I ever lied to them or didn't do what they wanted me to do. And so I snuck off and went and just did all kinds of fun things with him. And then I left home and moved in with him. And, we started everything off so wrong. And all through my life growing up, I went to church with my great grandmother and my grandmother. And, they went to different churches, holiness churches and different things like that. I got baptized probably, I think, 10 times. I did everything I could to try to get into this Jesus world I kept hearing about, right? But come to find out, I had just done something that someone else told me to do, and I really was not surrendering. And so when John and I went through our divorce, and we were just having a really hard time with that, he thankfully came to the Lord before me and asked me to please reconcile our marriage. And so I came home and didn't know why I was coming home, and I really wasn't wholeheartedly coming back to anything. I was just willing to try. I didn't want anybody else to be Nelson's dad. He didn't want anybody else to be Nelson's mom's or stand in that position. And so I came home to him, but I was still having an affair with another gentleman. And then I found out I'm pregnant, and I didn't know if it was John's or the other person's. And that's what broke me. That's what brought me to the place of just absolute surrender with God, just to know that I mean, the only thing I said to him was, I cannot do this without you. And I've just made a mess of this. And I don't know. I didn't know who he was other than what I had been told or heard in church. But who met me was the most powerful, loving God. And what he showed me was that I didn't belong on the cross. That was Jesus's place. And I didn't have to sacrifice myself the way that Jesus did for us. And he was so loving and kind to me and delivered me. And I stood up different. And I didn't know what all was different. I just knew I was different. I saw everything in my life through the eyes of God from that point on. And God has just been gracious to John and I. There's no reason for he and I to have any of the life that we have, to be able to even be on this podcast and give anybody encouragement or hope. That's the graciousness of God, to take these two messy people that I promise you, we're the most scratched, cooked up version of people there is.
We say we're poster child for idiots. We give idiots hope. They're like, what of us? What of us is doing stuff?
I mean, we sit in our house sometimes. He and I would just be, and we love talking with each other and just be. We would rather be with each other than anyone else. And sometimes we just look at each other like, look at us. I mean, look at us. Look at our marriage. Look at the love that God has given to us, and that we get to share with each other and our boys, and working with our children and our family, and impacting communities. I mean, it's beyond us, like how much God has entrusted us with. It truly is beyond us.
His generosity has filled our cups till they pour over. And first by finding us, hope for everyone on listening to this, something lost and found can be more precious than something never lost. And there's something about redeemed things, right? And me and Ash we have a love. It's for the ages. It's just so darn special. I mean, I don't know what to say, but we didn't know how to love each other. I thought it was about marriage was about sex and supper, and that was the whole plan. That was working, and once it stopped working, I thought, oh my God, we're having problems. But there's a lot more to it than that. A generous God built something in the garden for a husband and wife. It's one of the only things we're allowed to bring out of the garden is marriage. What a gift. For God to give us somebody to love us, that's our compatible opposite usually, and that he's going to use it to conform us to the image. God sent us the sandpaper and the grit we needed.
One of us is a little bit more of a fine grit than the other one in this relationship. I'll see if you can figure that one out.
It's great though, but God's generosity, he was first generous before he ever asked us to be generous. And what do we give that we didn't receive? Guys, we were $1.5 million in debt, $99,000 overdrawn, and had $19,000 one year in NSF fees back in the days when they were $19. We were super stupid. And so God loves idiots. He's got a supernatural plan for crazy people. That's like who his niche market is. So nobody would ever think that they did it on their own. It's like, those guys aren't as good. It's like, it's working. That's the gospel. We're not that good, but he is.
Yeah, and honestly, it's the same effort that we gave to being an idiot for the world that we turned around and started just being an idiot for God. Really, I mean, we would say things and people are like, y'all are so
I tell you what, it's on our heart. No kidding, guys. We're telling our kids, we borrowed to give when we got born again. We're broke as fire, and God told us to give the biggest gift we ever gave. We borrowed the dang money to give it. And God has blessed us. You want to know why our barns are full? Because we ain't got an untithed dollar since we got born again. We ain't that smart, but we know it's his stuff, and he wants us to do a good job keeping up with it.
So, John and Ash, who in your life came alongside you in this space as you guys were just coming through some of this to really help walk? We can't do it by ourselves. So who did God provide for you guys?
We had, again, gracious God. We've had seasonal relationships, beautiful, precious relationships that were there for a moment, and they're not in our lives anymore, not because of, we just don't get to see them anymore. But he used a couple whenever we first actually were going through all of our separation and working through the divorce, and John met this lady. He was helping her with a car, like do some repairs on a car that she had bought from us. And he's in the garage working on this thing, and she comes out, and I think she offered you like some tea. I'll let you tell the story, but that's how that started. And she and her husband basically held our hands because they had to be in between us because we were such jerks to each other, and walked us through like being exposed to what truth is about marriage. So, John, you can tell that.
So we were in the car business at the time, and Ash and I we have started or either helped start 60 businesses over our marriage, just for context. And we've worked together for almost 30 years side by side. And we like to call fussing heated fellowship. And we've had a lot of it. Okay. So, but I'm in the garage helping this lady. We're trying to reconcile, working on her car. And I said, man, my wife, our marriage is falling apart. I'm getting a divorce. I got to get me a good tan and a new truck, try to get me a new apartment so I can find me a new girl. And she's like, well, God will heal your marriage. I said, woman, are you crazy? What are you going to tell me? You got this beautiful house, picket fence, 2 dogs, and a beautiful set of kids, and your husband loves you. What do you know about my problem? She said, well, my husband left me for his secretary, and God healed our marriage. And I thought, oh my Lord. And see, here's one lesson you can take away. If there's hope in your future, there's power in your present. And the moment God puts hope in your life, and what I began to do, I said, if he did it for them, he'd do it for me. And I
was a candle in a dark room, right, John? It was like when you don't have hope, it builds a void in your life and you can't see outside of the darkness. And so she literally just lit a candle, and she's
well, it's the key to how
he
today reconcile marriage. So here's what she said: God will heal your marriage. I said, woman, you're crazy. More I got to thinking about it. I said, well, I like what she's got. And if people don't want what you got to wonder what you have, right? I mean, don't be exporting anything nobody wants. But she had a good marriage, had good kids, and a great thing. And they took us to this Baptist church and sat between us on the back row while we were at each other. And they just said, listen what to say, the message. And so they taking us there, and they gave us hope. And then at that church, the largest Baptist church in this area, the pastor, he tried to help us. So I give you a story. Me and Ash are messed up as a sack of hammers now. We go to church hollering the F word at each other and get there, get up into the Sunday school room, and they're all sitting. It's a newlywed class, about 40 people. Me and Ash go sit in the middle, and we're still grumbling to each other. They're like, any prayer request? Everybody's like, I raise my hand, like, me. And they're like, yeah, new guy. What do y'all? I said, man, we're going through a divorce. We're effing each other all the way to church, talking rough to each other. I'm mad at her. Y'all tell us something to do. And man, all I heard was chairs scooting out of the way. They were like, oh my God, these people are messed up. And then the next person was like, what's your prayer request? He's like, unspoken. And the next one was like, my cousin's toe in Idaho's hurting or something. I was like, literally, we're so messed up. These people right here don't know what to do with us. So we wait after church.
Well, and then during that, John, privilege of God. I mean, I love telling these stories. I love telling where God has brought us from, because it just shows you, if you will open your eyes and just ask God. He says, if you seek me with all your heart, you'll find me, right? Even if you're a doggone idiot and you don't know which direction to go.
Still work.
And so it still works, But John ends up, he meets a guy at this church that takes him to Carpenters for Christ. So he gets to go with these amazing men, these older, just
godly men. They're working my butt off, toting.
But they're constantly talking to him about, just the kindness of God and the words of God and how to be a husband and a man of God. And so then they take him to Promise Keepers. And
yeah, this local ER doctor, I said, I'm broke, I can't go. He said, I'm paying your way. We go there. And I don't know nobody sitting on that truck, the big bus. I felt like the dumbest, most messed up guy on the bus. You know how you feel. We don't know anybody. We get there, and that night it's in Atlanta, and Tony Evans preaches on the book of Hosea. Mm-hmm. And I just fill the floor up with tears. God is working on me. And I run out there to dang payphone, and I call her, and I said, would you come home and love me and be my wife? God's going to heal our marriage.
And at that Promise Keepers, he met a man named Dwayne Wooten, and you were asking who walked alongside us. This is when we actually had someone that discipled us. He took us by the hand, and decided, he and his wife, and walked with us every week. John every day. John saw him every day. He would come by the house and pray with him and talk with him. But he and his wife had been married for 13 years, got a divorce for 5, and then reconciled. And they've got the most. You think our stories are crazy? It's insanity.
You can help people that aren't as crazy as you, for sure. Like, that's why I tell people, we ought to give you hope. We ain't meeting anybody as messed up as we was. No. I mean, people come to us and they go, y'all make us feel better.
So he told us, he said, all I want you to do, he didn't ever charge us any money to counsel us or anything. And he just said, all I want you to do is to give away what God gives you. Freely give it away as soon as you get it. So a week after John and I reconciled, he had us testifying. And he constantly put us in the place to tell what God has done for you, tell what God has done for you. And not trying to be perfect in it and memorize scriptures and all that. He's just like, you just have to testify. And the more we did that, the more it grew us closer to God. It built a marriage and a life that's incredible. And now we have the privilege and the honor to do more of the work that he started. And just saying, how do we help marriages and husbands and wives and families and generations like see God be actually mighty and loving in their lives? Because it's something that we all need.
And our prayer is 50-yard line seats to miracles, guys.
We
It don't have to be ours, but we want great seats. So we're always praying, God, put us in the place to see restoration of people and places, because God cares about people and places. And so I'll give you this, and I'll tell you what, I give you the kind of what we believe heals every marriage that we've seen is not digging up the past, but it's a clear vision for the future. Because without vision, people and places perish. And what every marriage needs is a vision that's big enough you'll write checks with your life for it. You're willing to invest in it together. And so if Ash and I are going to help a couple, the number one thing we want to do is help them get a vision for their future. The past stuff's going to come up. Everybody's got nuclear waste in the basement. People say, well, I don't have it. I say, well, nuclear waste to us is unforgiveness. And if you want to know if you got it, if you're fussing in the shower and ain't nobody there but you got it. Right? You need to start working on that thing. And something I'll tell you about forgiveness, it's not a vaccination. It's a second by second, minute by minute, hour by hour choice of your will. You have to live it daily. Don't ever think you're done. You're just starting. And it's like anything else. You're going to have to do it till you go to the other side.
Absolutely. Well, you guys have teased out, I'm so excited for the rest of this podcast. You guys have already teased out a lot of principles of generosity and, but I want to press in a little bit more. So would you tell us, we talk a lot about generosity and whole life stewardship. And by that, we mean stewardship of your labor, your influence, your finances and expertise. And you guys are demonstrating that right now on the podcast with sharing your story and just speaking into the lives of every one of us, myself included, Laurie, the folks listening to this. But would you share a little bit more about your own journey as it relates to generosity and stewardship?
I never grew up having much of anything. And so generosity in my mind as a little girl was when I get there, when I get something, I can give that away. And what I have learned throughout my years, my birthday's this month, by the way, this weekend.
Oh, happy birthday. All
I
right.
just realized that. I turned 52 on the 22nd. Thank you. And so, but I've realized over these years, honestly, that generosity is one of the greatest gifts that God gave us. And one of the greatest places it shows up is his intentionality and his anticipation of us. And so, and that goes into another conversation that's really, really dear to mine and John's heart is the hospitality of the relationship, the hospitality between a husband and a wife. And the only thing I'm going to give away is that I've received from God. And what God showed me was before the foundations of earth, before anyone else ever thought about me, he had thought about me. And he knit me in my mother's womb. He anticipated me. And there is something marvelous about being anticipated. And I believe that whenever we give ourselves, we give our heart or our resources, our time, our efforts, we're giving a form of anticipation to the person on the other side to say, I've thought about you so much that I want to give the very best, the first fruits to you. And I believe that that's well beyond money. I believe people get really trapped in that thinking that you have to have a lot of money to be generous. I've had some of my most generous acts have been honestly just stopping and pausing and seeing someone. People aren't seen very often, and they're not loved well, and they're not told that they're loved a lot. And so I think that I think the most simple acts of generosity are the greatest acts of generosity, honestly.
And of course, money's easy because you can count it. I mean, one thing we have is we believe God showed us the answer and we're broken. Now imagine people say, man, I ain't got nothing. I'm broke. Well, be 1.5 million less than zero. That's worse. We were so pregnant, our belly button sticking out like a turkey timer. We had problems. And so we had to start repenting one check at a time and just honoring God right where we were, living on a dang budget and honoring him And here's what we decided. There's 5 areas of life that need to be stewarded: faith, family, fun, fitness, and finances. Those are our 5 F's. And we use a formula that God showed me in Fishes and Loaves. You know, the story goes is he's out there and got a little Happy Meal, a kid's Happy Meal, and he sits them, counts the fish and loaves, sits them down in groups of 50, blessed it, broke it, passed it out, multiplied, and it came back. So I said, God, you seem to be a God that measures, manages, and multiplies. And so I said, what if we do that? What if we take every one of our 5 F's and measure it, manage it, and trust God to multiply it because we're faithful with it? And so we set giving goals every year, just like we do making goals. And we're trying to exceed them. We're seeing if we can knock the cover off the ball. And when we're doing it, one thing I think that really is important is to give in such a way that you are personally connected and moved by the giving you're giving, like knowing why you're doing what you're doing. And one thing we do is we try to make sure we can be as close. The closer our contact, the bigger our impact. We want to know what we're giving to, and we want to know that we're praying for. And again, if you're not getting on your knees every day for the thing you're giving to, you're missing the point. If you're not giving systematically to it, you're missing the point. I mean, we have more financial stewardship. Most people got 401ks and extra people helping and all this support system, but we don't see that in our generosity. Like, I've got one mentor, and y'all guys will know him because he's been one of the Jess Carell, that all he does is mentor me in generosity. That's the bulk of our conversations. He could teach me about money because he knows a lot about it, but I think he's better at giving it away than he is at making it. And so even the other day we're talking, he said, John, I don't come up with a lot of good ideas, but I know when I see them. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I just now want to keep like a few $100 in my wallet or $1,000 in my wallet. And anytime we meet anybody, call it a snap judgment fund. Anytime we meet anybody who's just lost their job, their kid's in the hospital, they got cancer, something's going on, we just, boom, we put it on them. We're ready. And so for Ash and I, we're setting aside and trying to be as intentional about what we give as what we are about what we steward in any other area.
Well, and I would say, John, that I think the greatest place that Jess talks to you about being generous is in your relationship with me.
Number one, he tells me, he said, if the person who's the closest to you likes you the least, you got a real problem. And so what he said is, are you going to view every one of Ash's requests as an opportunity to serve? He said, that's the question. You're going to prefer her over yourself. And if you want to know one thing, I think if you want to know about a godly man or a woman, just look at their spouse's face. Because the Bible says, I wash Ash with the water of good words and present her back to myself holy and blameless. So God's given me the job of being a word washer. I'm supposed to be putting good words on her. I've about convinced her she's amazing and a gift from God. I've almost done it. Now I work hard at it. Don't be my job. I'm telling you, I'm putting emojis on her. I'm telling her stuff all the time. She's hot as fire. So she looks good. I love her. She's a gift. But you got to work at it. You got to be generous with your words if you want your spouse to feel loved and cared for. Because the world is, if the defecation has hit the ventilation in the world, nobody's confused.
And John, isn't it true that our marriage relationship actually is to be reflective of how God loves his church? And if that is truly God's calling on how we handle our marriage relationships, is you truly can know if somebody is walking with the Lord in how they treat their spouse.
You could just do a mic drop after Laurie saying, that's the story. No, I really believe what she just said. I said, I believe our walk is defined. And our best picture of God's love is when two people became one people. That he gave us this special thing.
We have many mentors in our life. Now, some would say it's because we need a lot of help, and we still do.
Because you invite them in and you're a joy to be around.
I like that.
We're good to be mentored now.
We have one of our mentors, our mentor that's been with us the longest. His name is Paul Estes, or spiritual mentor, that's the longest. He and his wife, Anita, And he's a pastor of one now, or me and John considered one.
He's 84 and he's confined to a wheelchair now, but we're talking all the time and he's still loving us, has for almost 30 years.
So the thing that what you just said, Lori, John does something very special. So he talks to his mentors every single week. He doesn't miss a call. He's a very good person to mentor because he brings challenge, but he also follows direction when they give him challenge. And so he's learning and he's teaching, and they're just doing a good push pull there. But and very honoring. But he opened up the call that he has with Brother E to all these men that John walks with. And so every Monday morning they get on this call. And then John asks Brother E the question. So the guys get to hear John being mentored. It's incredible. And it's beyond, 30 years of this relationship and 50 years of just wisdom of this man being a pastor. But one of the things I talked about, Lori, was about how God loves the church and, how the husband's supposed to love the wife. And he put it real simple. He said, it's really simple. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, right? He's like, God saw a need and he said, hey, this world needs my son. This world needs my son. My son is what is actually going to save this world, right? And so whenever he looks at the image, when that comes over to husband and wife, is that the husband should look for the need of the wife and say, what do you need? How do I love you? And what do you need to be loved? And that is the imagery. That's how they flip-flop on each other. And when he explained that to the men, I was just like, my goodness, that is so powerful. It's like God equipped us to see the need of the others to fulfill that. That's what he did. And all we're doing is imitating what he's already done. So when a husband does that with a wife, well, now you're getting into the heavenlies where a wife was created for a man, how women are so empowered whenever they are truly loved and washed with the word and create and pushed back to their husband blameless, we're really incredible whenever we're empowered the right way. And so
in Ash, I've learned that I can love her. Love is received from God. If I don't have it, I'm the lid. Like when I don't know how to love Ash, I ask God to give me love. Because when I first got saved, I read the definition of love. I said, oh my goodness, I'm sunk on this thing. Patient, kind, long-suffering, no records of wrongs, hopes all things, believes all things, trusts all things. I said, Lord, I'm out. I can't do this. And I felt the Lord said, no, that's not what I wanted from you. I was telling you how I'm going to be to you. I'm going to give you that. I'm going to be that way to you. And I said, oh, well, if you give it to me, I can give it away. I can't manufacture this stuff. Love and forgiveness is unmanufacturable. And the limit to most of our relationships is to receive it. And I'll tell you, this ongoing thing of God touching your life, I'm telling you, this thing is a journey that looks like a detour. It's everything you want, nothing you want in the same package. Believe me, it wasn't in the Baptist brochure. I can promise you that. You're going to go through a lot of trouble and poop's going to hit the fan. You got stuff going. And so what I'm learning, and I tell you, it happened the other day. I was at an event we do up on a mountain with a bunch of godly men. We had 4 of our 6 mentors there and 22 groups of 20 young CEOs. And we're seeking men about how to be godly men. And I started realizing something. Ash and I have been through a season of suffering. Her oldest son's had a lot of medical problems. Ash's mom passed. Our youngest sons have problems. We've had business problems. I mean, it has been one of the toughest 12 months of our entire marriage, 31 years of marriage. And so you're going to go through things in life. And what a godly man, Terry Looper, who wrote the book Sacred Pace, he took me aside and he said, John, I think I learned this is that at some point when you've done all you know to do and you're still suffering, surrender to the suffering. I thought, what? And he said, if you'll surrender to the things you can do nothing about, God will help you. And so I'm in the shower and I'm talking to God. I'm like, I surrender. Man, I start feeling this love and this thing's going. I'm like, well, that's what I was looking for. But you know what I realized? If I can trust God for the suffering I'm going through, that he won't put me through anything that is not for my good and his glory. If that's true, whoa. But then, you know what else got me? And this got me beyond it. And this is the most recent revelation I've gotten, is that if he doesn't do anything beyond what's for my good and his glory, every single stripe, every pull of the beard, and every punch on Jesus' hat was required. And I said, this is what sin cost. Okay. And I couldn't shake it. You know what I'm saying? And so a loving God is promiscuously crazy about us. And he is pursuing us with everything he's got. And so I'm beyond grateful that God don't give up on me. He keeps on working in our life and meeting us in our needs.
You guys talked about earlier about people and places, and you guys are really passionate about the place where you live. You guys run the Marsh Collective and very active in redemptive real estate there in your community and actually in other places. You have the Redemptification podcast. Would love to hear more about the work that you're involved in today as well. On top of clearly the restorative work that you guys have been involved in and seeing people's marriages be restored for God's glory and lives and things like that. But share a little bit more about some of that work that you guys are doing today.
We're doing some exciting things. I'm going to say a little bit because Mr. Marsh beat, I'm going to say it wrong, biting at the chomp. I almost said it backwards. I say sayings backwards all the time.
You just did that one. She makes me laugh all the time with her crazy sayings. She keeps me rolling. I'm telling you.
It's so right in my.
You know what she said the other day? She was like, baby, I wonder why they say hindsight's 50-50. I said, well, they don't say that. That's blind.
Oh my goodness, I make myself laugh. Which is one of my favorite things about me. But we actually we're doing a lot of work around the country still. We have great, amazing clients that we call patrons. They really feel implicated to an area or a community or a city. They feel responsible to make sure that there's growth and flourishing and thriving there. And I mean, we count it as joy to get to walk alongside them and be creative with them and do all that work with them. It's hard work, but it's good work. But here in Opelika, John and I have dreamed for decades to do something that was just meaningful and impactful in a way that would change generations and would change not just our children's life, but the community here and things that would impact it so much that you can't undo it kind of things, And so we've been working on an entire city block, and we've got some little outlying areas that we're bringing into that and connecting to that. But we've decided that we're going to be we're going to be the authorities of what biblical hospitality is all about. And the reason, and we say authority, is because we're doing it, and we believe God's equipped us, and it's how we show up in marriages, it's how we show up in our own marriage, in our businesses, in the businesses that we help create and steward. And we just really want to love on the people that are lovers of people and places. And so we're going to bring them here to Opelika, Alabama. We lovingly believe it's the center of the universe here. We don't think that's not true, but I'm going to let John tell you about it because he really, he has spent a lot of time praying, and God gave him the vision for this. And I get to be a part of it as his wife. I'm also the CEO of our companies, but I'm the primary beauty curator and the design and everything. And so to be able, for he and I as a husband and wife team, we're pretty dynamic. I guess you could tell it in different areas, but this is our jam. And when we see something that is broken and we see broken people that is impacting, the things that God gives us the ability to do is just incredible. We can take a paper clip and a piece of glue and make something beautiful out of it because God gave us that gift. But not just because it's pretty. It's like, what does it do to change the people that are now interacting with it? So, John, you can share what your side of that is.
Well, my thing is, I just kept asking the question. I didn't know it's possible. God, can we work at the intersection of purpose and profits? Can we do good and do well? Can we create social, spiritual, and economic capital? And can we do it in such a way that the world notices that your kingdom has showed up in this place? So imagine this, guys. We've done over 300 properties in 10 blocks. We still steward over 100 properties in that 10 blocks that we watch after for God and curate there. But 15 years to collect this campus we have, which is 7.5 acres. And we're stewarding something God gave us as a gift. We have, I think, a biblical and a supernatural way to redeem cities. And this can make your economics teacher and your Sunday school teacher happy, which is quite a job at the same time. And so what we do is we come in and we're seeing this, and our site, we're going to do a development. It's $30 million development. We're in the middle of it now. It'll be 67 boutique hotel rooms, 8 restaurants, and 3 event spaces on this one site. And I say, think of a land-based cruise ship. This thing's going to be a resort, an urban diffused resort that will create 125 jobs in our city, generate over $2 million of tax the first year is stabilized, pay a life-sustaining wage, and then be overarchingly watched over by the Biblical Institute for Hospitality and Design, where we're going to raise up the most educated, godly, aligned people from the dish room to the boardroom the hospitality business has ever seen. And we're going to deploy those people into the work of the ministry all over the dang world. And God's let us steward this. And I tell you what we're going to do. We've documented the whole process. We're making a franchisable model that we're going to ultimately give away. Okay. It's going to be a gift to people. We're going to tell them, hey, if we had to start over again, we got 3 decades at this and we've crashed more stuff than most folks started. I'm telling you, it has been rough. But we figured out that the understanding of the world in capital understands resorts. Okay, they understand the iconic food and beverage, overnight stay, and celebratory events can create tremendous meaning in a place. And so we think we can go in cities from 3,000 to 150,000 and transform those places with something that will work financially, will create economic capital, will create social capital, and will open the doors to spiritual capital. And so that's what we feel like we've been entrusted. We loved one city. Right now, God's given us 12 cities. Ash and I and our team steward about $2 billion worth of redemptive real estate over 12 small towns. The smallest town we're working in is 800 people, and the largest is 180,000. And this dang thing works. It's got supernatural legs underneath it we ain't smart enough to build. So when I see favor, I said, baby, we got rocks like in a shepherd boy sling. This thing's working. And we didn't even realize it. We weren't smart enough. We run a dang ministry for the last 20 years just trying to love God and help people. But what we realized, we've got a tool for human flourishing. And I tell you how you know if a place is flourishing, when the people who have the least are experiencing the most, just flourishing.
In the video I watched about you guys that was put out by Seattle Pacific Faith & Co. from many years ago, where you shared your story, you said something along the line, Ash, I think, God never wastes time. He's always weaving where you are to where you're going. And John, as you just mentioned, just the 30 years of brokenness and breaking things and crashing things, and how God is preparing you for this place, right? Is that not it's just a sweet reminder even to me about God's faithfulness and not wasting time and preparing us for the place that he plants us today.
And it's our purpose being worked out daily. You know, one thing Ash and I have the privilege to do, we have never taken outside capital. We've trusted God and put our butts on the line all the way through. And I think that was for a reason and a season. I think that was to teach us to be faithful with another man's things. You got to know how to be faithful with your own. I don't think you can export what you don't have imported. And so if you want to know, for us, if we're going to, and when we bring in these businesses, we're starting businesses all the time. And I tell you what we believe, we pick people, not projects, because God's in the people business. Projects come and go. They're like buses, but people matter. And so when we look at people, we do real advanced personality testing. We don't put 5-foot tall people in the dunking contest if we can help it. We learned that lesson. We just keep learning these lessons of how do we align. And what we want to build here is something where when people come here, they go, man, I wonder what God would build if he built a hospitality business. And that's what we're going to try to do, build something that serves people. And, you know, the first act, we show up in heaven, and he's got a prefix menu that's going to blow your socks off. That table we're showing up at, it's going to be big time.
Yeah, the other thing that we really want to work on is, for lack of better terms, a hospitality hospital. But how do we help the ones that are so broken in this industry regain back their dignity and use their gifts that they, sometimes they get lost along the way for different reasons. But it's a very hard industry to be in. And it's something that, even like the way that are with our servers, we're not paying them a normal server's rate of whatever, $2 an hour plus tips. We're stepping out. We're going to be bold and actually pay them even about double of what our minimum wage is in Alabama. We want them to show up at the table secure. We want them to show up at the table with who they are, and actually present. Their craft is listening and loving and serving and expressing, and so they have to not be preoccupied with the things that are dragging them down.
Most servers are paid daily, and they live that way. And guys, we built a broken system for them, so we want to honor them. Life-sustaining wage in every dang business we build in a way that reflects how good God's been to us.
You guys have already shared an immense amount of generosity, stewardship. Love it. Is there anything else, kind of final thoughts that you would share with the listeners and encouragement as we think about these things?
Oh, that's a hard one for Mr. Marsh. He never has just one thought left.
Well, I was thinking one thing I do want to say is if you can get spiritually constipated, so don't be taking it in and not putting it out, or you're going to be kind of sick. You better be understanding that when God gives you something, he's asking you to do something with it, not plant it. He wants you to put it to work. And so Ash and I tell you what, we're putting everything we got into everything we do as if God cares deeply about the work we do daily. And I can encourage you this. I believe if you're a husband and wife, if you can find and learn how to love one another, and that's hard. How I learned to love Ash when we were broken and I couldn't find her, I asked her one question. I think it's the best question I've ever asked from God. What is the one thing I could do to show you I love you that I'm not currently doing? Not 10. I knew she had a 10. Number 1, you know what she said? Don't throw sweaty socks on the floor inside out. I hate it. And so I tell her, we rebuilt our marriage on sweaty socks. I said, every time you look at that daggum laundry basket, you're going to know this guy's crazy about you. And so I would encourage you to love and then to be sophisticated in what you do. Like, we need people, believers, that aren't sticking fishes on there and doing half-hearted work. We need to be so good that worldly people are knocking our door down to see how we do it. And so we're committed to do sophisticated real estate development with love. And so whatever you put with love, it'll work.
It's very true. I would say one of my favorite things about God is that he has generous assumptions about us. And if we would have generous assumptions about our spouse and about others around us, we actually would be able to see them the way God sees them.
So good. So good. Well, thank you both so much for your time, your investment, your generosity to us and the listeners of the podcast. And we're really grateful that you've made this investment. So thank you.
NCS blessed our socks off. So you guys get a go to it too. A lot of what we've learned alongside you. So thank you for being faithful and teaching us. We learn every time we come to something you guys put on, and we admire the work you're doing in the world.
Well, praise God. Well, on the Generosity Now podcast, we do seek to inspire, equip, and connect our listeners for generous kingdom impact and whole life stewardship. More information on us, check us out at ncfgiving.com/Rocky Mountains and generositynow.org. Go ahead and subscribe to our podcast, leave us a 5-star review, and share it with your network. And today's doxology comes through the book of Jude, verses 24 and 25. Now to him who is able to keep you from stumbling and to present you blameless before the presence of his glory with great joy, to the only God, our Savior, through Jesus Christ our Lord, be glory and majesty and dominion and authority before all time and now and forever. Amen.